Welcome back to Realize Your Potential with Mike and Travis. We are here again with Hal Lublin. We're loving the love. You know, we're getting all the love from him. We're lucky enough to have him back for a 3-part series on how he was able to find success in Hollywood and some of the things that he focused on there. This episode is going to be focused more on branding. How did he brand himself? I'll let him tell you about his experience, but it's pretty cool. It's like a lot of cool stuff where you're like, what? You're on that panel and you did this, right? It's a lot of cool stuff that's happening. But I did tell you we would talk about how we all met. And so I left that as a hanging chad, making sure you're tuned in for the next episode. So now you can hear the amazing story. It's amazing to me. I don't know if it'll be amazing to you guys, but some of you may have heard of this little tiny video game called NBA 2K. And there's like a community of people who play. I mean, millions of people around the world. And it's an interesting community because you can end up making friends with some really cool people just like playing a basketball game. And so if you think about that in real life, right? Real life, if you go to a gym and you play, you may make a friend while you're playing there. And that's kind of what happened with Hal and I, is we randomly played together, and we enjoyed each other's playing style and communication in that, and we exchanged gamer tags, kind of like phone numbers, right? Like, hey, can you give me your number? Like, hit you up sometime, hang out. And so we exchanged gamer tags, and the fear in my heart as I was like, do you want to be my friend? And then for Hal to say, yes, I would love to be your friend, made me feel so special in my heart. Not knowing how amazing of a human being he turned out to be. It was like a match made in heaven.
I accepted your rose. Yeah, it's interesting how relationships. So in the physical world, I don't want to say in real life because it's all real life, but in the physical world, you meet someone, you talk, you find common areas of interest, and then a friendship builds off of that. In this game, you're wandering around a digital park. You play a game with someone. The only thing you have to evaluate them on, assuming you don't go into game chat, which I don't, toxic, is how did they play?
We could do a whole bunch of episodes on just the toxicness of game chat.
But you can tell
communication.
Exactly. How did this person play? Were they selfish? Were they unselfish? How did you work together? And then we wound up winning a game and then talking to one another. And I remember when I heard your voice, because that's always a sketchy situation. It's all right, I'm going to go into game chat. Yeah. We are squatted now. And I was like, oh, this is an adult human being who sounds
not a
12-year-old. Yeah, not a 12-year-old. They're not blowing out the mic. Like they seem like a mature together person. And then, there's a whole group of friends that I've made through playing this game. And you and I happen to live pretty much in the same city, so we've been able to have lunch a couple times. So it was nice to. Yep. I love taking online relationships offline. I have a lot of, I've been involved in. One of the things I've done in my business life is worked as a social media consultant. So I'm on board with the idea of having meaningful relationships that start online and then transition into offline. I think that's a very natural thing. So it's great to see it applied to the video game world as well. Here we are.
And then we brought Mike in. Mike's my real life friend.
Yeah.
We met off the game.
Mini moons.
Brought him on the game, convinced him to play the game, and then you got introduced to Hal through that, Mike. And then it's interesting how the web continues to evolve. Like, we've got this crew of people that we play with. You log on. And to your point, how like it's interesting because it's just like talking to my friends, right? Like me and Mike talk probably every day. But I look forward to also, just as much as I look forward to talking to Mike, I look forward to jumping on and talking to all of you guys, right? And just we talk. I mean, we talk about politics. We talk about basketball. We talk about life. I mean, people know my wife from hearing her over the microphone, you know, and my daughter from running in and out, and your wife from hearing her over the microphone, and there becomes this like weird, like, oh, I know who your wife is. I don't never met her, but I like know who she is. I know kind of her demeanor and her all of that through this freaking video game, right? And I know a lot of people who play video games understand this culture and this web. But I think, strangely enough, this story really speaks to what Mike has talked about continuously on a bunch of our videos, which is your network of people and who you surround yourself with. Because the reality is, to your point, how there's a bunch of people that we would never be friends with anymore. And I think we could think of some of the same people in that who are very toxic. You called it toxic relationships, right? Yeah. And just as if you would keep those you should keep those toxic relationships out of your physical life, you should also keep them out of any interactions that you have, and that includes the video games or any other type of relationship that you have with folks. And so, who you surround yourself with allowed me to meet you, who allowed you to be a guest on our show, but also through our experience together, I've been able to learn things and talk to you about your experience. You've been able to talk to me about mine. And we can take from each other just like we would any other friendships that we have and incorporate that into our regular lives. So, pleasure to meet you. And I can't wait to game with you a little bit later. So,
likewise.
We'll jump on. And maybe Mike will join us for PS5.
I need to get back in the game.
Jump in. We need you.
Yeah, we're pretty. We got a lot of people in the crew now, Mike. So it'll be an interesting introduction. So let's talk a little bit about branding, Hal. So I'll let you go a little bit more into detail about some of the things that you've done as it relates to branding in terms of conferences and different things, but it's so hard to establish a following in anything that you do, right? We're trying to establish a following here with our channel. But talk to us a little bit about how you did that. How did it start, failures and successes along the way, and how did you do that?
Sure. So there's sort of two tracks to this in my mind. One is the brand that you present out to the public. So I'm trying to gain a following. I want people to know me for XYZ and then to follow all my content so I can hopefully, for anybody who is a professional entertainer or a business person, you want as large a following as possible. So when you call them to action, hopefully you can mobilize them to watch something, to buy something, to download something, whatever it is. That's one track. But I wanted to talk first briefly about the branding that I've tried to establish as a performer to people within the industry. Mm-hmm. So hopefully when they think of me, they think he's versatile, he's pleasant to work with, and when you bring him in, he gets the job done quickly, and he takes direction well. Those are if those were the four things that I was known for, then I know I've been successful. And that goes back to high school. One of the most influential teachers that I ever had was my junior and senior year in high school theater teacher. His name is Ken Belinsky. I stay in touch with him to this day, love him dearly. And he put us on the phone with somebody who was working on Broadway. So this group of high school actors got to talk to a professional. And one of my biggest takeaway from that was how important it is to be professional and be pleasant to work with. That got etched into my brain that day, and that is the one piece of advice I give to anybody else who's thinking about getting into performing is people want to work with you if you're pleasant. Talent doesn't overcome how difficult you can be. So you don't get to, just because you're talented doesn't mean you get to be a bad person and get away with it. You have to be easy to work with. Nathan Fillion, who now stars in The Rookie, he was in Castle, Firefly, he's a phenomenal actor. He's a great looking guy. So he fits the part of a star. But also he's so nice and so generous. And my experience working with him, he's always been pleasant and kind and treats everybody the same. And my understanding is that on the set, he's the exact same way. So he's someone you want to work with. If you see that you are working on a show with him, you're going to feel good that it's going to be a pleasant experience, because everybody has to be there working together. And if they don't, if you are the focus of a lot of the work and you're making it unpleasant, why would anybody ever want to work with you again? So
yeah, I would think that's true in a bunch of relations. I think that's true in general, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even going back to our 2K analogy, right? Like, there's people who are talented who, you know, they can get buckets and you can win a bunch of games, and winning is the point of the interactions, in my opinion, are actually the point of the game.
Mm-hmm.
You have fun interactions, but winning is an important part of that.
Yeah.
But if someone is not cool to work with, then you don't want to play with them. But also friendships, right? And work, not in the entertainment industry, right? And so hiring people and getting hired, I think that's a really good call to action for people, is being pleasant and someone that someone wants to work with.
Yeah, and you know, as you were describing that, how a few circumstances came to mind of people that either I've managed or I have or am peers with, that they have this hard edge to them that sometimes puts people in an uncomfortable space where it's, you know, that might be getting in the way for them. Well, I know that is getting in the way for them, you know. So, and sort of like how I wrap my head around things most times in leadership is, you have an operational person or you have a relational person. Ideally, you want to be in the middle where you can sort of look for solutions and understand, all right, do I need to take an operational approach with this, or do I need to leverage relationships in regards to being pleasant and whatever behaviors that are associated to that, right? So anyways, what you were saying resonates with me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine everybody watching can think of an example of someone who is pleasant to work with and who isn't pleasant to work with. And I bet if you took their talent levels, that they are pretty much equal to one another. So that's like, especially in performing, there are a million people, or maybe fewer, but there are more than one person. There's more than one person who can do what you do. So your differentiators will be, number one, what you bring personally to it, because everybody's got their own twist. But also, are you someone who's easy to work with? Are they going to want to have you stuck in a booth with them for 2 to 4 hours doing a bunch of voices? So I make that a point. Like, I don't know anybody who has ever had a complaint about working with me. I show up on time. I do the job. I try and do it as quickly as possible, which is a big thing in voiceover, because they're trying to get through a lot of copy and you're playing a bunch of characters and you have to get it done as quickly as possible. And can you take, if you are given a piece of direction, can you incorporate it and make the adjustment quickly? And that's something I know I'm good at. Like, I will hang my hat on, if I don't give you what you want the first time, you'll be able to get me there pretty quickly, because I'm listening to what you're saying and I'm going to incorporate it and give you something different.
So listening is important, huh?
You know, it's crazy to think, but that's the big thing about improvising too. Like, honestly, everybody in the world should take an improvisation class, whether you're going to be a performer or not, because the skills you learn, and I've taught, I did improv training for LSAT tutors. So people who are going to be training other people to take the LSAT, I took them through improv exercises. And a lot of it was, here's how you communicate. But more importantly, here's how you listen to people. You have to, the best improvisers are the best listeners. Because when you get into it first, you're like, I have a real funny idea, and I'm just gonna railroad it, and I'm gonna come in here, and this is gonna be so good, and it never is. Because you've come in completely denying everything around you. You haven't listened to anything that's going on, so everything's completely disjointed. And when you listen, you're going to find so much more gold and so many more building materials to make a better scene or to make your project better at work. Just that ability to listen and take in what people are saying is critical. It's just a critical life skill. And improv is a great way, if you want to hone those skills a little bit better, improv is a great way to do it.
Awesome. I love that. So part of I love how you broke it down, right? Part of it is your personal branding, when you walk on set or you walk into an area, how do people feel about you?
Mm-hmm.
Because if they don't have that type of feeling, then you're not working, right? So, and working becomes it is the primary vehicle. You could have a whole bunch of social media followers, but if you're not ever doing any content, not doing anything, it doesn't matter, right?
Yes.
So I love how you broke down that piece. Now talk about how did you translate that into outward branding?
Sure. So part of it was the luck of the draw, in that but it's also opportunity meeting preparedness. So I did a show called The Thrilling Adventure Hour. I still do it now. We've been doing streaming shows in quarantine. It was for 10 years in LA, running monthly, and it was like a murderer's row. It was like the 1927 Yankees of casts in terms of just great, like all the way up to television stars who were in our core cast, down to like me and a couple of friends who came up in through Second City together and all work, but we're like the utility players who can come in and fill everything. And together we are just this sort of juggernaut cast. So we, in 2012, did a Kickstarter for a graphic novel adaptation of our show. And one of the stretch goals was we'll make a concert film, and it raised, I want to say, close to $300,000. At the time, it broke records. And to me, we had started podcasting 3 years prior, or 2 years prior. So we were starting to build. The reason why it was so successful is the podcast allowed us to take a stage show that only 350 people could watch at a time and make it available worldwide. So each hour show became 3 episodes of the podcast because they would break up. There were 3 segments that got broken up. And I realized, as people are backing this, I should start engaging with them, because that's an opportunity for me to have them know who I am. So they don't get to see me. People who come to the stage show know me because I was out there narrating every single segment. They knew that I could do a bunch of different characters because they'd actually watched it. But in a podcast, it's a bunch of voices. And you might come because Nathan Fillion is in it, or because you're a fan of Paul F. Tompkins or Paget Brewster or whoever, whatever amazing guests we had in any given month. So I was like, they're going to know who I am because I'm going to put it out there. And that allowed me to build a fan base that already existed. Just let them know who I was. So a lot of it was engagement. And that was something that I taught for social media, for businesses, is it's one thing to have you can create an account and put it out there, but you have to do the work to build a community around it. Whether it's people who are fans that you want to watch your next appearance on a television show, or people you're trying to sell something to, you have to figure out who your market is and kind of go to them. And that was what I did. When I started with Welcome to Night Vale, it had gone from a small podcast made by a couple people to the #1 podcast in the world in the course of like 4 months. And I joined the cast a little bit after that, just doing a live show, two sold out live shows in Brooklyn. I walked out on stage. I had two parts, one of which was a character. I had listened to the first 3 episodes. My character wasn't introduced until 4, so I knew nothing about him. But I came out on stage and I said, "Hi, this is Steve Carlsberg," and the crowd reacted like the biggest star in the world had just walked on stage. And I recognized that was for the character, not for the actor. But after the show, I turned to one of my friends from Thrilling Adventure Hour, because a bunch of us had done that show. And they had opened these side doors of the theater, and it was packed with people who I assumed were there for the star of the show. So I turned to my friend, I said, "Watch this." And I walked over, and I held my arms out like they were there for me, and they went crazy because they associated me with that character. So once I knew I was playing him, I looked for people talking about him and engaged with them. So I became, that's like my brand is, I will engage with you. I'm there to talk. I'm accessible. So the Work Juice Players is the group from the Thrilling Adventure Hour. I'm known as the most accessible work juice player because you can get a hold of me. If you talk to me, chances are I'm going to talk back to you because I enjoy the conversation. And that has served me well. I just look for opportunities. Where can I build my audience? When I launched We Got This, it was because Thrilling Adventure Hour was coming to a close. And since I knew that was ending, I grabbed one of my best friends who was also in that cast. I said, we're going to do something together so that, number one, we talk to each other every week. And number two, we have this audience from this show. How do we build off of that and continue and bring them something new that adds dimension to what they know about both of us? Mm-hmm. And so those are sort of my keys to building audience. Anytime I do something, I look for, the Venture Brothers community. I went to the subreddit when I started that show, and if they were talking about my character, I went in and said thank you, or I gave them a little tidbit about what it was like working on the show, so they knew, oh, this guy will talk to us. We should follow him. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's been my kind of formula as I move through my career.
I like it.
So Hal, I think that's really, really interesting that you talk about that, and you talk about really the consistency of getting to know your fans, creating fans, really, like, and talking to them and interacting with them. And I know you talked about the beginning of it being a little bit of luck when it came into you being able to seize that opportunity. But the reality is there were a lot of good actors that came together to make that project work and make sense. And then you found the opportunity to engage with people through social media, which created this fan base and branding that is now kind of taken on a life of its own. I mean, you're going to different Comic-Cons and doing all of this other stuff around that because you were able to force that action, right? Like you were able to force that action to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about, you invite me to a con, I'm going to do as much as I possibly can. Put me on every panel, have me host your Q&As, because I'm going to prove the value that I bring so that even if I don't have something big to promote, that I'm somebody you want in the mix at your con, because people who come there will know me. They will remember something I did that was funny. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, I remember this guy hosted the dating game and he did such a great job. So we'd love to have him back. We love to see him there. And they do, cons, a lot of them will take evaluations. How is this panel? What do you think of these people? They have to figure out what guests are worth bringing back. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not always going to be propelled there by star power. Very often that's going to be because of the number of things I do and the number of intersectional fandoms that I touch, whether it's podcasts or wrestling or cartoons or video games, improvising, all that stuff sort of works together. And the radio appearances were the same deal. We got into that through the publicist for Thrilling Adventure Hour that we were working with through the Kickstarter. And we went in and I did a decent job as a guest, but the next time I was in New York, I reached out to see if they'd be interested in having me on again to promote what I was there to do. And then that led to, oh, the hosts are coming out to LA. Why don't I come on and say hello? And then, hey, how can I be even more valuable? Oh, I'll walk you through all the Marvel movies. So we'll do a rewatch of everything. And then, it just led to friendships and more opportunities. Number one, because I was good at doing it. But number two, because I went and sought it out and wasn't afraid to ask.
Yeah, great call out. Great call out. I love it. Great insight. And I hope that people are taking away from this episode not only things that they can use to be successful if they're looking for a career in Hollywood, but also hopefully they're taking away things that they can work on in their everyday life. This is one of those episodes you definitely want to go back and rewatch. There's a lot of good content in here. Please continue to like, share, and subscribe. And in the comments below, talk about some of the things that you learned from this episode that maybe Hal talked about, where you can actually go and action those and put those into use for you so that you can maximize your success. Great insight this week, Hal. And I'm so sad that this is our last episode is coming up together, but please join us for part 3, where we're going to dig into maybe some of the challenges and pitfalls that you really have to look at if you're going to be successful in this industry. Frankly, any industry in general. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you next week.